So my ultimate prediction for part 9 of JoJo is that it is going to explore a more modern take on society, featuring protagonist Joshua Joestar, a new and upcoming YouTuber on a mission to become the most subscribed to channel in the world. So in honor of that inevitability, I recommend that we all get into the spirit of things now by subscribing to the New World Review for regular JoJo content uploaded straight into your YouTube feed. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are here to talk about the number 9 as it applies to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So specifically some sort of, part 9. Because being the filthy manga heathen I am, and given where we currently are in part 8, I cannot help but sense a spectacular conclusion coming soon, which of course gives rise to the question of a part 9. And in regards to this, there is a great amount of strange misinformation out there on the internet. I mean, who would have thought? But there is one particular troll video that has Araki, quote unquote, confirming part 9, and it's obviously fake if you actually watch the video, but many people don't for reasons. And so there are those who legitimately believe that it is in the works, or at least that it is in Araki's mind, which it may very well be, but we are certainly not privy to that. The most solid piece of information I have been able to find comes from comicbook.com, which is already, it's a dubious source at best, but they claim that during a convention appearance in Italy, specifically at Lucca Comics and Game 2019, Araki was asked about the potential of part 9 taking place in Italy, to which he said that he would try to write it in an Italian setting. Now the problem I found here is that comicbook.com don't cite their source for this information, and the links they provide are grade A clickbait that lead you to a completely different article. Although as a result, I did get to see some children doing an ora, so it's not all bad, I guess. Not what I'm looking for though. Definitely not at all what I'm looking for. And if anyone has an actual source, please do let me know in the comments. But in any case, even if we were to take this information at face value, it confirms absolutely nothing, and it really is just a fun bit of pandering. And dispelling that is important, because before leaping into any of the fun stuff, we do need to recognize the very real potential that JoJo will conclude following part 8, and there are a lot of good arguments for and against that. One of the more commonly cited ones is Araki's age, because yes, he still looks like a brilliantly healthy young man. I mean, I seriously don't think I've ever seen a more chilled and generally delighted mangaka than him, but at the same time, he is currently 59 years of age at the time of this recording, and while I would never call that old because my 59-year-old mother would promptly hit me, it is around the stage where you need to start weighing up what your life is and how you're going to plan for the golden years. And while the exact age of 59 might not quite be retirement ready, JoJolion also isn't finished yet, which will no doubt easily take Araki into his early 60s, and then the thought of another part being published according to the same schedule definitely take him into the 70s range, which is pretty wow. And that's not to say that part 9 would have to be the same length and format as 7 and 8. It could be shorter, and we will discuss that in a bit, but at the same time, it is still a very confronting prospect for somebody who has already given over 3 decades of his life to this series. And of course, a lot of that is due to the sheer passion that Araki has for his work, but when you're 60 years old and facing the prospect of committing, say, another 5 to 10 years of your life to full-time work, then there are a lot of very serious considerations to be had. But moving away from Araki himself, there is also an argument to be made that a part 9 may not be narratively necessary, because part 8 is currently doing such a great job of condensing the entire alternate JoJoverse into one solid chunk. I mean, we now have a fully fleshed out family tree with so many roles filled that the question mark very much becomes, where would you even go from here and why? So I think that if Araki chose to retire, or maybe not retire, but end JoJo after part 8, then it would give us a fairly solid full stop, having explored the alternate universe significantly more than I personally thought we were going to when I first started JoJolion. But these are all incredibly boring and pessimistic arguments, so let's now switch our thinking and delve into why there could, nay should, be a part 9. And the first point is one that you've almost certainly heard from every person who explores this idea, or even one that you've brilliantly come to conclude yourself, which is that JoJo very clearly operates on a trilogy-based system. Admittedly, it's something of a loose system, but it's definitely there. So for example, parts 1 through 3 are all intrinsically linked to the Stone Mask, the Pillar Men, and all of their shenaniganry, and what their ambitions for the world have resulted in. And I highly doubt that they would have predicted a flamboyant time-stopping vampire, but there you have it. More so, it also connects the fabric of Dio's involvement in the series, and there is a good argument to be made that this could be seen as the Dio trilogy, despite part 2's distinct lack of Dio. And then in parts 4 through 6, we focus very heavily on the ever-mysterious Stand Arrow, which has varying degrees of importance. However, this trilogy can be characterized once again by Dio actually, but this time more in terms of exploring Dio's legacy that he left on the world. And oh my god, this guy is an important figure. But really, everything that occurs in these parts does have a basis in Dio, especially 5 and 6. And then at the conclusion of 6, that not only wraps up that trilogy, but the first entire JoJo universe. And then cutting to the alternate universe, we finally have one where Dio is less involved, and the majority of the underlining narrative seems to focus on the Holy Corpse, which was one of the primary goals of Steel Ball Run, as well as being responsible for all of the bizarre happenings of Morio in JoJolion. And given how Part 8 is progressing with its unrelenting focus on delicious fruit, I don't think that JoJolion is going to provide the proper ending for this Holy Corpse saga, and it just feels like we are itching for a proper conclusion elsewhere. And I'm really hoping that we do delve into it more, because the alternate universe mythology has captured me far more than that of the first JoJoverse. I mean, the stone mask business was always interesting because ancient powers and all, but the arrows always felt kind of meh to me. However, the idea of the Holy Corpse has me very consistently hooked in Part 7 and 8. I just think that Araki has implemented it far better as a device than his previous trilogies, which is to be expected. He has grown exponentially as an author and an artist, which is another reason why I'd be so keen to see him cap off this trilogy in peak Araki form, and I guess kind of completing the magnum opus that would be JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. There's just something so satisfying about the idea of a set of 3 trilogies rather than 2 trilogies and a diptych. But in order for us to do that, we also need some substance to explore beyond the meta-narrative of the corpse, and given the way that the alternate universe has progressed so far, you would think that, well, we'd need to find another ultimate form of another classic JoJo, many of whom have already been detailed in this new continuity. The 2 notable protagonist exceptions are Giorno, because he was a bit of a weird existence that doesn't really fit into the alternate universe. I mean, not yet anyway. Araki could very easily fix that with his stupid degree of creativity, but there's also the potential of an alternate Jolene, who is a generation that has not been showcased yet because alternate universe Jotaro is too busy playing with oranges and lemons to have procured Spawn as of yet. That isn't to say that those 2 are the only options though, because one of the biggest missed opportunities from my point of view was never really expanding on a certain Shizuka Joestar, who was adopted by Joseph at the end of Part 4. I felt so certain that she was inserted to play a pivotal role in Part 5 or 6, but that's not quite how things turned out. However, there is plenty of room to give an alternate universe Shizuka some much deserved time in the spotlight. Then again, there's also nothing to say that we have to dwell on other incarnations of past JoJo's, and Araki might decide to form an entirely new one, or even pull something of a Part 8 by having us focus on a former antagonist. Like if we're keen to have a bit of a Golden Wind revisit, then maybe we could even have an alternate good guy Diavolo or something. In any case, there is also the looming question of what kind of period and genre that a theoretical Part 9 would be set in, and this one is tricky, quite tricky, because Part 7 and 8 skipped a ridiculous amount of time, which only leaves us with a handful of options. Essentially, JoJo could follow its established formula and take place in the same year that publication began in reality, in which case we would be looking at a narrative set sometime in the 2020 decade, which is intriguing, but it does once again narrow the possible story genres available. So what have we covered so far? We've done horror, fantasy Nazis, action adventure, slice of life, gangster mafia, prison break, western, and mystery. So that's actually quite a fair bit, but it does leave us with some good options remaining, and a lot of these may sound incredibly strange and off-putting at first, but then again, I also remember seeing Steel Ball run in a western setting and I was just like, oh, really? And then it worked out just fine. It took me a grand total of like 3 pages to adjust to the new setting, and it came with a huge advantage of being so radically different to everything that came before it. It felt fresh, so that was a great benefit, even if I wasn't a fan of that genre specifically. So it gives me a lot of hope that JoJo can work under any genre condition. So something that JoJo has yet to explore would first of all be a sports genre. You know, maybe like we have our lead JoJo as some plucky young player in some sort of ball-related game, and then the main antagonist would be on an opposing team, and stand battles take place during or around matches. And yeah, I know it sounds really stupid on paper, but on paper, everything about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure sounds utterly ridiculous. Another funky idea might be the genre of true crime, whereby our JoJo is some form of investigator, either privately or with the police, and we head into a seedy underbelly story, potentially featuring gangsters a la Golden Wind, but with more of a focus on the investigative side. Maybe a seedy film noir style take on the series, with more cerebral and investigative stands, you know, stuff like Moody Blues. I really enjoyed the idea of Moody Blues, and pretty much anything that doesn't have a strict combative focus. Although something much more modern might be the possibility of dipping into the superhero genre. Like maybe the alternate universe of JoJo reaches a point where stands become public knowledge and users have to register them, and it deals with all sorts of impacts that has on the world at large, with famous stand figures being hailed as some sort of superhero and or supervillain like beings. And you know, of all the things I've said out loud, that's the one that I really don't mind, because I do think the idea of stands somehow becoming common knowledge would be quite fascinating to explore. And finally, I will also pose the idea of sci-fi, which I think is the most unlikely, because Araki doesn't seem to enjoy gazing into the future all that much, but it really is the only super broad category that really hasn't been touched on at all in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I am more than ready to see JoJo in space or something along those lines. But how does this all come together? Well, even if Part 9 is on the cards, I suspect that we will have to live with the idea that it is going to be much shorter than its predecessors, or most of the predecessors anyway. Parts 1 and 2 are pretty short. I mean, that or Araki is going to be super ambitious, and Part 9 may never be finished. I honestly don't think that a short part would be a big problem though, because if you condense the core story of every other JoJo part, then they actually do become very, very short experiences. The thing that fills JoJo with content are the stand battles, and so to make a shorter part, you would just need less stand battles and more story focus. It's a very simple equation and certainly not something that I would be complaining about, so long as the stands chosen to be included were the cream of the crop interesting ideas from Araki. But in the end, as a greedy consumer of manga and anime, this basically boils down to me want things, give things now, please. I may have only converted to this whole JoJo business very recently, but I do find the idea of this series ending to be quite an unpleasant one to say the least, especially with so much untapped potential in the hands of one of the most creative mangaka that Japan has ever produced. But what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts on a potential part 9 in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more JoJo content, then please do let me know by subscribing to the channel for more regular JoJo wondrous stuff delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.